There is an ingredient hiding in your child's favorite candy, his cough syrup, even his strawberry yogurt. It is made from petroleum, and in a lab at the University of Southampton, researchers proved it can change the way a child behaves in less than 1 hour. The ingredient is called red dye 40. It is the single most widely used artificial food coloring in the United States and Canada, and it is everywhere. Swedish fish, fruit snacks, strawberry milk, the liquid Tylenol you give your toddler when he has a fever. I used to think food dye was harmless. A little color, a little fun. That is what I was told. That is what the labels suggested. But then I started reading the actual research, and I realized something that genuinely unsettled me. In 2010, the European Union started requiring warning labels on foods containing red dye 40 and 5 other synthetic dyes. The label says, and I am paraphrasing only slightly, may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. That was 15 years ago. And for most of that time, American parents heard nothing. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what red dye 40 does inside your child's brain, why some children react to it and others do not, and the 3 places it hides where you would never think to look. Let me take you to Southampton, England, 2007. A team of researchers led by Professor Jim Stevenson designed one of the most important food studies of the last 30 years. They recruited nearly 300 children, not children who already had behavioral issues. Regular children, 3-year-olds and 8-year-olds from the general population. Every child received a drink. Some drinks contained a mix of artificial food dyes, including red dye 40 plus sodium benzoate, which is a common preservative. Other drinks were identical in taste and appearance, but contained none of these additives. Nobody knew which was which. Not the parents, not the teachers, not the researchers handing out the drinks. A true double-blind trial published in the Lancet. The results were clear. Children who consumed the dye mixture showed significantly more hyperactive behavior, not just the ones who were already energetic. Children across the entire behavioral spectrum shifted. 3-year-olds became more restless, more impulsive, harder to redirect. And the effect was not subtle. The research team later compared its size to the effect of elevated lead levels on IQ. That is not a small thing. I want you to sit with that for a second. A drink. One drink, with coloring added, changed how children behaved within the same day. But here is what makes this more complicated than just dye equals hyperkid. Not every child reacts the same way, and understanding why is where the science gets genuinely interesting. In 2010, a follow-up study by the same Southampton team looked at the genetic profiles of the children from the original trial. They found something specific. Children with certain variations in histamine processing genes, particularly one called HNMT, were significantly more likely to react to the dyes. Their bodies process histamine differently, and when synthetic dyes enter their system, the histamine response amplifies. The result looks like hyperactivity, but what is actually happening is closer to an inflammatory response in the brain. Think about that. Your child eats a bag of candy, and 40 minutes later, he is bouncing off the walls, crying over nothing, impossible to calm down. You assume he is overtired, or overstimulated, or just being difficult, but his body might be having a chemical reaction to the dye itself. And you would never know, because the behavior looks exactly like a normal tantrum. This is where it gets personal for a lot of families. I have read hundreds of comments from parents who say some version of the same story. We cut out red dye, and our child was a different kid within a week. And for years, the official response was basically, that is anecdotal. That is not science. But here is what those dismissals missed. The 2021 California OEHHA review looked at 27 human clinical trials on synthetic food dyes. 27. Their conclusion was direct. Synthetic food dyes can cause or worsen neurobehavioral problems in children, both with and without pre-existing conditions. And still, for the average American parent walking through a grocery store in 2024, there was no warning on the box. Now let me tell you where red dye 40 hides, because this is the part that surprised me the most. You expect it in candy, you expect it in bright red drinks, but red dye 40 is also in children's liquid medications, cough syrups, chewable fever tablets, the pink amoxicillin your pediatrician prescribes for ear infections. You are giving your sick child medicine to help them feel better, and that medicine contains a dye that might make their behavior worse. Dye-free versions exist. They are just not the default. It is also in things that are not even red. Chocolate cake mixes, barbecue sauces, some brands of pickles. The dye is used in combination with other colors to create shades of brown, orange, and purple. So checking for red foods is not enough. You have to check labels. Here is the part of this story that I keep coming back to. The European Union looked at the Southampton Study in 2008. Within 2 years, they required warning labels on every food containing these dyes. Not a ban. A label. 6 words on the package that told parents, this might affect your child, and that small label changed purchasing behavior across Europe so dramatically that most major food companies voluntarily reformulated their European products to remove the dyes entirely. The same companies, selling the same products, in the United States with red dye 40, in Europe without it. I was reading about this, and it made me think about something I did not expect. It made me think about trust. Because every time you hand your child a snack, you are trusting that someone checked, that someone made sure it was safe. And the uncomfortable truth is that for decades, the United States and Europe had access to the same science, and they made opposite decisions about what to do with it. In April 2025, the FDA finally announced a plan to phase out red dye 40 and 5 other petroleum-based dyes from the American food supply. The target deadline is the end of 2027, so change is coming. But slowly and voluntarily, no formal ban has been issued. So what do you actually do with this? First, you do not need to panic. Red dye 40 does not cause permanent damage. It does not cause ADHD. What the research shows is that it can trigger or worsen hyperactive behavior in sensitive children, and the effect is temporary. Once the dye clears the system, the behavior normalizes. But temporary does not mean unimportant. A 3-year-old who has a meltdown every afternoon after snack time is temporary, but it changes the texture of your whole day. It changes how patient you are by dinner. It changes how you feel about yourself as a parent. And if the cause is something you can remove from a shopping list, that matters. Second, read labels. Specifically, look for red 40. Allura Red, FD and C Red number 40, or Red 40 Lake. If your child's medication has it, ask your pharmacist for the dye-free version. It almost always exists. Third, try a 2-week elimination. Cut out foods and drinks with red dye 40 for 14 days and watch what happens. You are not diagnosing anything, you are observing. If you see a difference in your child's behavior, that is useful information you can bring to your pediatrician. And here's what I want you to remember, because this connects back to the very first thing I said. You are not paranoid for checking a label. You are not overreacting for questioning an ingredient your child eats every day. The EU questioned it 15 years ago, and they were right to.